Right here you can see a standard detail for a floating floor. Now, like we said before, this is not required everywhere. In the state of Colorado, this is mandatory. If you have a cement slab floor, then you have to float all your walls. It's because of the expansive soil we've got here. There's a few other states that require it, but many do not. So that's something you need to look into wherever you are. In order to float the wall, you're going to nail a piece of green tree lumber. This is just basically a rot-proof or rot-resistant piece of lumber to the floor using 22 actuated nails. You can see here. You can drill it if you want and use an expansive bolt in the concrete. That's just fine. It just takes a lot longer. And then you put blocks between the wall. You'll put a couple of 2x4s so that your wall is now touching your ceiling. And you see here we had to put blocks coming out between the joists because we didn't have something to nail to. Along this end, we cross the joists, so we don't need blocks. Over here, we've got our blocks, our wall comes down, and is hung. So you actually can either just space it with blocks, or you can use a 2x4 over a small block and lever the wall up into position to put pressure on it. Nail your top, and then while you've still got pressure on it, so that you don't knock your wall out of position, you're going to drive that large nail through both plates, through the top and into the bottom. If it's easier, pre-drill your top plate. You can go ahead and pre-drill this hole, drive a nail through. Do not pre-drill your bottom. You want that to drive in nice and tight so that that spike doesn't move on you. So that's just an 8-inch spike that's holding the wall. You can see we've got them about every 4 feet, every third bay, all the way around. We're going to have one of these. And that's how you're going to float your wall. Blocking is a major concern on basement remodels, and you're going to get hit hard on this by inspectors, especially now. Fire and insulation are two of the biggest things they seem to be cracking down on. A lot of the things that they used to, as far as building components, don't seem to be as big of a concern anymore. But fire blocking and insulation, you're going to get dinged on. So there's a couple of things you need to watch for. One is you have to separate any areas in your basement, any walls, drop ceilings, any areas, into areas no longer than 10 feet, no higher than 10 feet. So you go by this 10-foot rule, and you can see right here, in order to separate this wall, we've got our studs framed away from it so air can pass behind it. That doesn't fly. So what we've done is we've taken another 2x4. This is a good place to use all your scrap or bad lumber. If you get those ones that are twisted that look like a pair of skis, save those for the end and use them here. So you cut it to length. You want it to fit snug top to bottom so you don't have to foam there. Drive it back against the wall, and you're just going to pop a few nails in along the length of it to hold it in place. Then you can use foam sealant. That orange is a fire rated, and you're going to seal the gap along it. Now there's a fire separation from here until we get around to our next location here. We add another one. You see at the bottom, filled out the base with foam as well to keep the fire from moving down and around that. So the other type you're going to see on these walls is the OSB. Basically the exact same thing we're after here. This is just when the location is too big to get a 2x4 to do the job. Cut a strip of OSB. Here we stepped it, so there's another little piece that steps back, goes all the way up to the ceiling. That's foamed in. Now back here, you can see there's a gap here. The insulators actually took it upon themselves to come around the corner and just stuff it right here, and that's actually going to meet code there. They could have stuffed in that bay right behind my fire break. That's fine, but all these bays are going to get insulated too, so really we're going to get stuffed out completely with insulation. So those are your horizontal. On your vertical fire stops, that's going to be at the top of all your walls. So when you frame your walls, you need to make sure that you're placing a fire stop in. You can do this after the fact, but it's a lot more work. You're going to have to come in between each of your joists or each of your stud bays and either stuff or foam in there. If you do what we did here, you can see on top there's a piece of OSB. See if we can see it from underneath. You can't really. You can just see it from the top. There's a piece of OSB that lays across there and goes all the way back on top of the wall and butts with the outside plate. Right here you can see it. So that piece of OSB goes on first. So when you go to your ceiling, snap your line where your stud wall is going to hang, measure it out, and cut a piece of OSB, a big strip, that will go from your line back and touch the green plate on top. Then we butt our wall tight to the OSB and nail that. Now we've got a fire break. That's going to keep fire from moving, or air draft from moving up this bay and into the ceiling cavity. They don't want it to rush up and come across this ceiling here. We're breaking it up, or vice versa. If something's in the ceiling, it can't draw air from the walls and it can't move down the walls very easily. We're just trying to contain if there is a fire incident. Here you can see after the wall was framed, we needed to put a fire break. We did this using fiberglass insulation, and depending on your municipality, you may or may not have to do this. This is really considered a little bit overkill, but some places are going to ask for this. We went through with the foam as well around the edge of the insulation, just to secure it in place and make sure there were no drafts. There's plenty of basement finishes we've done where we didn't have to do that, where we just stuffed insulation and that was it. We were good to go. But if you want the added protection, or if your inspector calls you on it, go ahead and grab a can of that expansive foam and foam up around the edges.